Jupiter retrograding through the second degree of Aries. The comedian. The question of objectivity arises with this. A comedian entertaining a group. Adjustment to feedback. Objectivity arises when we come to see that we exist within an extended sphere of reality, and when we can laugh at how insignificant we actually are within that inestimable cosmic world. We see how silly is our prideful self-love, and within the context of the greater picture, how irrelevant are our personal thoughts and feelings. It is a great leap forward on the path to realization when we release self-importance. Egotism. It's a requirement for us to establish an ego, and a strong ego, in order to claim a place in the world without which we wouldn't exist. We do need to make our claim, and this can happen on many different levels. From physical, we have to claim our food and our space of being, to psychological, we have to make sure that we're not bullied and dominated as to have no opinions of our own, and emotional, where our interaction with other people has a sense of ebb and flow and give and take. All of these things require us to establish an ego. And yet, ego is one of the most dangerous of things. It separates us from the whole. And that is a requirement. Yes, I've just said that. And it's a danger because separateness is not real. Separateness is not healthy because it's not real. Our separation from the whole can actually be too extreme, so we don't identify with unity, therefore with others, and we insulate ourselves from that which feeds us, mostly on the level of soul. So, as you would expect, the first and second degrees of Aries, which must necessarily be polarized according to the system of studying the 5 Sabian symbols within any expression. The first is an affirmation, the second is a contrast to that. So we have the first degree of Aries establishing self, and in the second degree of Aries, where we are now with our Jupiter, gaining some sense of self as being slightly absurd. This humor is well meant. It's not ironical or cynical or defeating. It's just a chuckle. It's God's chuckle at how badly we're doing, trying to understand all and everything. And it's basically the mirror of life that is reflected to us individually. We put ourselves out there, and what we get back is an objective response to how well we're doing. And it's best to laugh at that, not to take it too seriously, because first of all, we're certainly getting it wrong, because you can't get it right. Perfection doesn't exist. Secondly, everyone else is doing the same thing. Everyone's getting it wrong, and we're all just like young children stumbling blindly into some awesome experience that we will never understand. To address that situation without humor is bound to bring a sense of serious disappointment and self-denial, which is not unhealthy. We have Rudyard's take on the matter, which is very clear. I think that this sense of objectivity, seeing the world through the eyes of another. He talks about reflexive self-consciousness arising here. A comedian reveals human nature, the capacity to look objectively at oneself and at others. While the first phase of the process of emergence is essentially in terms of subjective impulse and the desire to act, the second phase represents the attempt to evolve an objective awareness of existence. Through a sense of contrast, consciousness is gradually being built. It is what Teilhard de Chardin calls reflective consciousness, the ability to see oneself reflected as in a mirror, and eventually to laugh at the inadequacy of the form one sees. Thus, humour, the triumph of objective consciousness over subjective feeling or moods or involvement in self. This secret of reflexive self-consciousness, seeing oneself through the eyes of another, is the essence, secret of spirituality. All of the morality and the doing what makes us feel good and the service and all of these derivatives that support our spiritual path are secondary. The primary aspect of spirituality is the awareness that we can gain of self. Knowledge of self becomes eventually knowledge of God. Because we are a facet of God. God is shining through us uniquely. And to become aware of God, it becomes necessary to become aware of self. And we can't do that inwardly on a subjective level. We have to do it on an objective level so that we can see who we are through the eyes of another and how we differ from everything and everyone. Jupiter, going backwards through the second degree of Aries, is going to give us an objectivity that we require to establish ourselves firmly and on a true footing, an authentic footing for whatever comes next. Basically, we're talking about a 12-year cycle, beginning in the first degree of Aries, taking that period of time to unfold a project. So we're all going through a different type of life now, a different phase of our total life. And it begins with this sense of emerging from just a feeling into an idea, into a germinated idea where somebody else knows about it and approves. And then we actually move into this second degree of Aries, which is going to give us the feedback we require to make adjustments. Our ideas are wrong at the beginning. They're not quite exactly right, and we need to adjust them in order to make them right and make them work. And that means collecting support, collecting resources, adjusting our thoughts, responding to changing situations and all of those kind of things. Out there, coming back, we are reflected by the circumstances of our lives, and that whole process of reflection of self is Aries too. Jupiter is taking that on board. Jupiter's job is to expand, and it does that by integration. And that's different from the other planets. They've got different ways of doing this. But Jupiter's job is to expand into a different way of being by taking on new points of view, new ideas, new energies. Jupiter's very good in the second degree of Aries because it can do that. It does not fight against the opposite or interpret somebody's laughter as ridicule. We're not being ridiculed here. This is not an attempt to usurp our authority, which laughter often is. The comedian's job in society is to make us laugh at ourselves because we're all a little bit ridiculous, actually. And it's healthy for us to know that and not get too lost in self-importance. I go back to the original affirmation of how dangerous the ego is. The danger is that we like it too much and we become falsely aware of self as important. And self-importance is the death of spirituality. We have to give up self-importance, not self. We claim self, but give up self-importance. So it's the importance that we're trying to get rid of. And here we are, early on in the cycle, Aries 2. The first lesson is to be. The second is not to be more than, not to think of yourself as more than anything else. You're just what you are, and that's fine. But to become more than something else or someone else is the beginning of limitation, of disappointment, of isolation, all of the things that make people afraid and lonely. So if we can actually just forget that we're special, just get rid of that idea. We are special in a very limited sense to ourselves, maybe to some small number of close people, but in any collective sense, we're no more special than 1 billion, or in fact 10 billion other people. And that realization, that objective realization, makes us laugh a little bit, because we've got this feeling of self-worth that doesn't check out against history or against the future. It just doesn't check out. So try to release self-importance during this time when Jupiter's going through this second degree, just for a few days.